Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Take Graphs here on the Chase Thomas podcast, the MLB show, your favorite MLB show, each and every week on this very program, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, everything school HQ up there in
New York City.
Fangraphs own Jon Tayler. John, good evening, sir. How are you?
I am doing well, waiting for Game 3 of the ALCS of this moment. I'm especially excited for Game 3, both in the ALCS and the NLCS, because if the Rangers or Phillies, and if the Rangers and Phillies, doesn't really matter, if either of them wins, that will put one team up 3-0, which means I get to deploy my favorite baseball stat, which is that no team in Major League Baseball history has come back from being down 3-0 in a 7-game series, except for the 2004 Boston Red Sox, who did it to the 2004 New York Yankees. Not a lot of people know about this. It's a fact that I want to make sure it gets out there, because I think it's important that everyone knows that the 2004 Red Sox are the only team in Major League Baseball history to come back from 3-0 down in a best-of-7 postseason series, and that they just happen to be playing the New York Yankees. I think that's important that people know that.
I like that. Who would be more likely? Who's more built to come back from 3-0 between the Diamondbacks and their?
I have to
Astros?
say Houston.
Okay.
I think in part because it's a better lineup than Arizona's. It's a better rotation. It's just the Astros are just a better team.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm really interested to see with wherever this series goes, and obviously by the time we record again next week, both CSs will be done. But the thing I'll be interested to see for the rest of this ALCS, Houston, a much better team this year on the road than at home. Texas, a much better team this year at home than on the road. So I'll be interested to see if that holds for this series. I mean, obviously those kinds of stats are not predictive in any sense of the word, but it is just a neat little thing that I do wonder if it'll play out again. But I think the other thing too is Texas, of the two teams, like the one real weakness of Texas, and I think we've already seen it almost play out now, is that bullpen. Jose Leclerc has pitched in every single game this postseason, which experts will tell you is probably not a good sign either for the future health of his arm or the lack of other reliable options in the Texas bullpen. I think similarly, especially for Game 3 tonight, Wednesday night, the big question for Texas is going to be not just for this series, but if they advance onward, what are they going to get out of Max Scherzer, who hasn't pitched in over a month? Not really clear how long he will last in this game, how sharp he will be. Obviously, they've gotten great results so far from Jordan Montgomery and Nate Eovaldi. That feels like a pretty good starting twosome, but having Scherzer to fill that third starter spot or to be available, because obviously that's a big step up from having to start Dane Dunning and Andrew Heaney in a postseason series. That would, I think, go a long way, not just toward getting Texas out of the ALCS, but toward making them a legitimate World Series. Well, they already are a legitimate World Series possibility, but a legitimate World Series favorite, if anything. But we'll see. We'll see when it gets there. Similarly, I think Philadelphia is in a really, really good spot. And obviously, when you're up 2-0 in a best-of-7, the odds are substantially in your favor. I'm looking up the odds now because I want to get the exact numbers. So 2-0 teams that go up 2-0 usually end up winning the series about, I think it's like 90% of the time. It's rare, maybe that's a little too. I think it's like 80-90%. But actually, you know what? I'll do even better. I will go to our Zips postseason game-by-game odds, which takes all this fun information into account. We currently have the Rangers ahead of Game 3 tonight as 79% odds-on favorite to advance. In the NLCS, the Phillies are 79.9%. So 79.2 for Texas, 79.9 for Philadelphia. So that about scans 80% odds of winning the series. But again, stranger things have happened, like in 2004 when the Boston Red Sox came back from 3 games down in a best-of-7 series to beat the New York Yankees and win the pennant and go on to win the World Series. So it can happen. It will. It has happened the one time. I hope it honestly never happens again, because I just want to keep cashing that check every single postseason. But I'd have to say of the two, I think Houston is better suited to come back from this deficit. But I think both the Astros and Diamondbacks are in a fair amount of trouble right now.
I would agree, Jon Tayler. Your take graph take of the week is what, sir?
I'm going to stick with Texas. I think this is legit a team that, regardless of how this series goes, regardless of whether or not they win the World Series, I think we're going to be talking about them going into next season as the best team in the American League.
Oh.
This is and you've seen it play out in the postseason. You saw it play out for like 85% of the regular season.
Yeah. This
is a phenomenal roster. Built, and what I think makes it especially great is just the diversity of the way it's built. It's not just, the fact, they went out and paid the money for Corey Seager and Marcus Semien and Jacob deGrom, although deGrom obviously is hurt. It's also the player development. You've already seen it with Evan Carter, who's been probably the best player on the Rangers. I think maybe Seager is the other position player. It's either Seager or Carter who's been the best part of the Rangers this postseason. Wyatt Langford, the number 3 overall draft pick last summer, has torn the minor leagues up in his brief stay. I think there's a legitimate chance he comes up midseason next year. He already looks like an impact candidate. And this is a deep farm system, too. You look at on the Fangraphs big board of prospects, looking just purely at Texas. And this is a list we updated during the season. We have 5 Rangers players in the top 100. That's Langford at 15, Carter at 30, Sebastian Walcott, high A level third baseman at 41. Justin Foscue, their 2020 top draft pick out of Mississippi State, currently in AAA at number 69. And for those who've forgotten he existed, Jack Leiter at number 74. It's an open question as to whether Leiter is going to be the guy that I think everyone initially, and maybe not through the end of the draft, but at least before the draft, projected to be a kind of super number 1 guy. I don't know if that's going to be the case. But still, that's 5 guys in the top 100, plus 4 more 45 future value prospects. And for those not familiar with future value, it's just a number we use to indicate what we expect a guy's value to be as a major leaguer. So, 60 and above is a future MVP candidate. 50 and above is a future All-Star. 40 and above is a future solid regular. So 45, you're looking at a guy projected to be somewhere between a regular and an All-Star. 4 guys fit that description now: Brock Porter, Abimelech Ortiz, Owen White, who's gotten a little bit of MLB experience already, and Cameron Cawley, and then a bunch of 40-plus guys, including Kumar Rocker, who, despite the injury, still there, still hanging out. Plus, you've got their 2023 draft picks, Caden Scarborough. Obviously, it was one, I love that name. It's just the most young baseball name you can possibly imagine, Caden Scarborough. Alejandro Rosario, who they took out of Miami. There's a lot of depth in this system. And that's even considering that they went through this kind of fallow period where a lot of those prospects we all kind of expected would be something in that kind of early Rangers renaissance, that group kind of headlined by Joey Gallo, but that also included Nomar Mazara, Jurickson Profar. There are a couple names I'm missing in there, but regardless, it didn't really pan out quite the way expected. This is an even deeper and better group than that one. So it's not just that Texas has spent the money and is clearly willing to spend the money. As you saw when they picked up Scherzer, more than happy to take the freight on and give up a top prospect in Luis Angel Acuna, who would have been, I believe, is on our top 100 currently, and would still be there if not, obviously, for being dealt for Scherzer. A team that I expect also to be active in the offseason, particularly when you keep in mind that their rotation next year, I think we talked about this last week, top line right now, Scherzer, Eovaldi. That's really where it stops. Jordan Montgomery's a free agent. DeGrom obviously will not pitch next season. Most likely won't pitch at all next season, depending on how his Tommy John rehab goes. Haney's still under contract. Dunning's still under contract. But there's room for them to go and get more. I would not be surprised to see Texas link to Blake Snell a lot to get another top flight arm in there. Similarly, I could see them being interested. I could see them definitely making a pitch for Ohtani to give. I don't think it's necessarily likely.
He doesn't feel like a Texas fit to me.
But the thing is, I think Texas will be involved in the free agent market. I don't see this as given how busy this team has been, given how willing they've been to spend money. I don't see Texas all of a sudden, especially if they don't win the World Series, just going, well, we've done a pretty good job so far. Time to kick our feet up and relax.
They have a lot of AL Phillies Dombrowski vibes.
They do.
It's like a blank checkbook, and they're just going to contend, and they're just going to keep spending until the wheels come all the way off, and they're just not winning, and just older guys are like they have a lot more DeGrom situations where they just have a lot of money tied up in guys who can't play anymore.
And the difference is that the Rangers have a far better farm system than the Phillies do. Again, you look at our current overall farm system rankings, we have Texas as the number 5 farm system in the majors. Philadelphia down around 19, which is granted way better than Philly has been in quite some time. But again, this is a top 5 farm system with lots of depth, lots of top end talent. Again, the willingness to spend, the willingness to go after top free agents. And this is going to become a marquee destination for free agents too, because all you have to do if you're in charge of that team is go, look at what we've got. We've got Corey Seager. We've got Marcus Semien. We've got Max Scherzer. We've got Nate Eovaldi. We've got Evan Carter. We've got, on and on and on. We've got Wyatt Langford. He's going to be here in a minute, It is a very well set up team both for now and for the future in a way that I don't think any other AL team is really matching. I think Baltimore very much so for the future, with the abundance of prospects they have and the fact that similarly as with Texas and Wyatt Langford, they will have Jackson Holliday up at some point next season, if not there from opening day. But I think and this is probably more about Baltimore than this is about Texas, I can't say that Baltimore would go into the season as my number 1 AL team unless they spend the offseason doing the things necessary to establish themselves as the number 1 team. And that means going out and getting a number 1 starter at some level or another. It means adding to that roster and not just saying, it'll happen when it happens. That's why I think Texas, that is the X factor for me, is that willingness to go out, spend the money, get the players, make the trades that, again, like you said, it's a perfect mirror of what Dombrowski has done with the Phillies. He identified that team as being one that was ready to win now, and he's done everything he can to keep that window as open for as long as he can with that current core. And again, Texas is in better shape because their core, if anything, granted, Seager and Semien both now on the wrong side of 30, but still, there's a lot of room for that, especially that current offensive core. And there's, Carter, Josh Young, Jonah Heim, again, Langford eventually. Those guys are going to be around for a while. And so I think it's really got Texas in a good spot. I don't necessarily know how I feel about Houston. Obviously, they're always going to be there because they always are until, like similarly with the Rays, you bury them at your own discretion. But Tampa has its own problems, particularly, especially and similarly with the Orioles when it comes to making the moves they need to make for that roster. Minnesota, I don't think is ever going to be that kind of a big spender. You don't really know where the Blue Jays and Yankees and Red Sox are at right now. It doesn't feel like the Mariners are ready to take that step.
Big spenders for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, so
I guess I actually shouldn't say that with the Red Sox and the Blue Jays. And what
I wouldn't say that. I definitely wouldn't say that with the Red Sox, whose front office shenanigans right now, in terms of everyone available being like, you know what, I don't want to deal with this mess.
Who has officially turned them
down? Brandon Gomes, the Dodgers general manager. Okay. James Click has turned them down.
I didn't see Click officially, so Click's out.
Click has turned them down.
That's a bad omen.
That's a bad omen. Chris Antonetti in Cleveland has turned them down. They are not getting a lot of bites from people right now. Even Michael Hill.
How much is Boston sports radio right now? Just like, give me Theo. I can't do a Boston accent. Where's Theo? Where
the fuck is Theo Epstein? Get that fuck. Yeah, look, they have way bigger problems, like the fact that the Patriots are just in a complete death spiral right now.
But that helps.
That does. I mean, that's the thing. The one nice thing about the Red Sox being where they are right now is that New England fans in Boston are equally divided now between the Patriots are in a death spiral and the NBA title favorite Celtics are about to start their season. So that's going to keep some of the heat off. UConn just won the title.
A lot of Husky fans. A lot of UConn.
A lot of Husky fans, obviously in the Boston area, except for those who were BC grads. But either way, I think that the road is very well set up for Texas too, because as we just noted, there isn't really as in the National League where you have the Braves and the Dodgers who are just perpetually, persistently there. That team doesn't really exist in the American League. The closest you could probably get right now is the Astros,
and the Rangers are already at 2-0. Can they coexist as co-dominant forces in the same division for the next several years?
I think you can see that already with the Phillies and the Braves, that even necessarily it doesn't really matter which one wins the division if they both are going to end up making the postseason. And I think similarly with the Rangers is that the AL wild card, we saw how crowded that race got, but at the same time, this is a team that already looks to be at least a head and a set of shoulders above the likes of, whoever finishes second in the Central, above the Mariners, above the Angels, above the Blue Jays. This, if it were not for that month of September where Texas spent the great majority of its time crapping its pants, I think we would have gone into this postseason looking at them and going, well, there's your number one team in the American League right there. Leave the Orioles out of it for the time being, who, again, clearly do not seem to act as if they are the number one team in the American League. So for now, again, who knows? Maybe Houston comes back and wins 4 straight and knocks Texas out, and Max Scherzer's arm falls off in the process. But I think regardless of what happens going forward, that is a team where you're going to next season being like, that feels like your pennant favorite right there.
I like it. I wasn't expecting that from you, Jon Tayler.
Yeah, it's what Take Graphs is all about, is the unexpected.
That is 100% right. Don't forget, folks, if you're watching us on YouTube right now, first off, thank you for checking out the full episodes here, clips, shorts, all that good stuff, each and every Thursday on this very show. Look out for that. Take Graphs, the MLB show here on the Chase Thomas podcast with the great Fangraphs own Jon Tayler. So watch out for that in your podcast feed every Thursday and on YouTube at the same time we're taping these on Wednesday evenings. If you have any MLB questions for us, you can always email us at chasethomaspodcast@gmail.com. Tweet at us at pod Chase Thomas, all that good stuff with any of your MLB takes and thoughts on the show. And as always, leave us a 5-star rating and review on your preferred podcast player and why you like the MLB show each and every week here on this very feed. And also check out the website, chasethomaspodcast.com, where you can get information about John, the show, and everything else. Great homepage, chasethomaspodcast.com. John.
That was a heck of an ad read. That went on for... Do you have that all written out, or did you...
No, I don't.
Okay, wow. That's
See,
impressive.
John, when you've done like a gazillion of these, like...
Okay, that's fair. That makes sense.
I'm a professional, Jon Tayler.
This is a professional production.
Speaking of professionals and professions, Kim Ng might have a new profession, which is maybe not being a general manager in baseball, because she might have a sour taste in her mouth at what just happened to her in Miami. Reports this week about why she ended up leaving the Miami Marlins, a team that just made the playoffs. And we went into, correct me if I'm wrong, Jon Tayler, there was a playoff mandate before this year, and then she proceeded to meet that said mandate by the Miami Marlins making the playoffs, and then still go above her to hire someone else as a president of baseball ops. Speaking of ops, the optics of this, have you heard this? Have you seen this? The optics of doing something like this is both wrong and also very on brand for the Miami Marlins. So shout out to the Marlins, who, it doesn't matter if it's Jeffrey Loria or whoever owns this baseball team, they just can't get out of their own way. It just doesn't matter. Like, this just made me really sad. This is a sad story, which should have been a happy story of, hey, we're going to give Kim an extension. She got this team to the playoffs. The Marlins are in pretty good shape. We have a modern day Tony Gwynn now. We have great young pitching. Let's ride this momentum and be a healthy, normal organization for the next couple of years. How about that? And instead we're like, no, we're just going to actually...
We're going to go back to being stupid chaos.
Yes. God. Jon Tayler, what do you make of all of this right now?
So for starters, it is not a surprise, I think, for what you just said, which is that we don't really expect the Marlins to behave like a normal franchise. They perpetually operate in that Rockies tier of, well, why would they do that? And then you realize because that's who they are.
Yep.
As our own Jay Jaffe over at Fangraphs put it, all of this feels very par for, as I should say, in writing about Ng's departure. All of this feels very par for the course for the Marlins, who haven't exactly cultivated a winning tradition because, these things cost money. And that, I think, is probably the main issue here, is that, as Jay says, long-term success in baseball involves money one way or the other. You've got to invest in either free agency or in player development or in a farm system, or ideally all of the above, but at the very least you have to invest something. You have to try. And what is so confounding about this for me is that while there are a fair number of moves of Ng's that I don't like, for what it's worth, I don't think she has done a particularly good job in free agency for starters. The Avisail Garcia contract was one where from the second it was signed, you kind of looked around and went, why would you do that? Similarly, I thought Jorge Soler was not a great decision. Getting Luis Arias was great. I didn't like what it cost in Pablo Lopez. I know you and I had talked a bunch about there must be a different way to get hitting without having to give up that level of pitching. Lo and behold, for as good as Arias has been, Lopez goes to the Twins and puts together a season that's going to get him down ballot Cy Young votes. You know, but I also will say that it's very clear that in building this roster, Ng had to operate under significant budgetary constraints. When you consider the fact that the Marlins payroll for 2023 was $110 million, and that's the highest payroll they've run probably close to ever. That is not a significant pay. That is a third of what the Mets spent on their roster. And granted, there's only one Steve Cohen in baseball, But 110 million is pretty middling, all things considered. You know, if you pull up, if you go to Spot Track, how do you say it? Spot Track? Spot Track?
I always said Spot Track, I think.
I kind of like Spot Rack now that I...
Spot Rack?
Spot Rack, now that I
Isn't
think
it funny,
about
though, with reading? Like, that's one of the worst... Like, the worst thing about reading is, like, especially when depending on what you read, but, like, there are books you don't realize that because the word just doesn't pop up in normal conversation, that you have this word in your mind, it's pronounced a certain way for like 17 years, and then you find you just say it out loud one time, and someone who actually has used it a couple times in real life looks at you and you're like, oh no. It's the worst feeling imaginable, is you're just like, I don't.
It's a fun one. I always love the I forget, there was near one time I heard a friend say banal but pronounce it banal, and look, that's a tough one. That one does not come up in conversation all that often, but it's still just very funny when it gets mispronounced. No offense to anyone who has said banal before. But looking at 2023 payrolls via Spot Rack, Spotrack, they have the Marlins at $105 million. That's 22nd in the majors. The Tigers spent more money than the Marlins did. The Brewers spent more money than the Marlins did. The Rockies spent more money than the Marlins did last year. There are, and I'm just going to count them out loud because that's how I'm doing it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 teams in the majors that spent more money than the Marlins did last season and did not make the postseason. And while I know I've argued here that the Marlins making the postseason this October was honestly kind of a fluke. Their run differential was, I think, something in the minus 55 area. They should have been a below 500 team per the peripherals. Doesn't matter. They still made it, and they did it with one hand tied behind their back.
Yeah.
And I think that too goes to a little bit of an explanation as to why Kim Ng ends up signing players like Avisail Garcia and Jorge Soler, because when she wants to try to sign someone better and more expensive, she presumably had ownership coming to tell her, no, you cannot do that, but you can sign half as much if you'd like. I think it's not dissimilar to the way that Derek Jeter stepped away from this team in a similar, granted under different circumstances, but I think the same animating principle of this team is just not going to spend in the way it needs to spend to be a consistent contender. It is just going to be content to have a bottom 10 payroll and maybe sneak into the playoffs as an 84-win team every now and again, but that there's no real interest in going any further. And to say nothing on Ng's part of having to inherit this team that was built, that Michael Hill built, who another name who recently turned the Red Sox down, which not a great sign for the way things are operating for the Boston Red Sox when Michael Hill says no.
Jon Tayler, next GM of the Red Sox, who says no?
Me, for starters. Having to move on from Gary Denbo, having to find a new manager after Don Mattingly, finding seemingly a good one in Skip Schumacher, who has performed very well, dealing with a lot of injury issues, Sixto Sanchez getting hurt, Trevor Rogers getting hurt, Jazz Chisholm getting hurt, Sandy Alcantara getting hurt, and he's obviously not going to pitch next season. It's very strange to me that, there were a lot of issues with this Marlins team when Ng inherited it and then as she created it, but she's done pretty well, all things considered. Again, with one of the lowest payrolls in the majors, she created a postseason team. And again, it doesn't. I can say until I'm blue in the face, I don't know that the Marlins were all that legitimate a postseason team. They still made it. That still counts. But
it also makes the job like so much more. It was already probably a job that most GMs were like, I really don't want this, and that goes back to the Jeter stuff and how that weird exit happened. But also, why would you want this? You can't trust ownership now. Like, exactly. You can't trust. Like, why would you want this job? Like, what?
I'll quote Jay again because I think he puts it well. If Ng's track record in handling the Marlins roster is hardly flawless, what head of baseball operations record is? Yeah. The point stands that she built a playoff team despite limited resources. The Marlins are trending in the right direction and will bear Ng's fingerprints for years. She deserved the security and authority to continue building. Yeah. But like to your point, if you're a prospective general manager, you watch someone the Marlins brought in. And not just someone. Kim Ng is not just some rando off the street. She has been in this world doing this kind of work for decades. Mm-hmm. She is highly valued, highly respected, an intelligent, someone who is lauded across the league for the work she has done.
She's been doing it longer than I've been alive. She started with the White Sox in 1990.
Oh my God, that's right. You're not. Oh, wow. Okay, well, look, doesn't matter. We're not going to focus on that moment of reminding us of the passage of time. Mm-hmm. Point is, this is a veteran, a major league veteran, who has been around the block several times, who knows what she's doing. And if you're someone who is a prospective GM, you just watch the ownership of this team that already refuses to give you money to build a team, that is apparently just going to, that refuses to give you money to buy to create the team. They hire someone who basically moves heaven and earth to make this roster better without the ability to spend money, and they reward her by being like, you know what you need is a boss to micromanage you from up top. No, you're right. No one's going to want that job because you're not going to get the commitment from ownership either in terms of spending or in terms of having the authority to make your own decisions.
Yeah.
If anything, it reminds me a lot of what's going on in Boston, which is to say you have meddling ownership that does not want to give you your own authority to do something, and where the standards for success are both constantly moving and in many cases just completely at each other's odds. It's different in Florida because I don't think there's an expectation with the Marlins that you should be contending every year. In fact, ownership doesn't really seem to care whether or not you're contending every year. I know you brought up the whole playoff mandate thing, but that very clearly is just a cover for them to be able to say something in public of, no, we're not just a revenue sharing leech. We actually do want to make the playoffs every now and again.
I think they were also surprised that they made the playoffs. It was like one of those where this was not the plan. We were always going to hire someone above you, and then you actually went out and made the playoffs. So we couldn't. This made it very more awkward.
That I would agree with that, and I think I'll join the chorus. Say good on Kim Ng for knowing her worth in this, for stepping away from this, for saying I don't want to deal with this kind of Mickey Mouse bullshit. I also think that I don't really know that I see her getting another general manager job, and not because she doesn't deserve it. She would be eminently qualified. There was a lot of talk when she took this job that she, for a long time, had turned down offers and interviews from other teams in the past because she didn't know that she wanted to do that particular kind of work. This was kind of a special case, being willing to do this. And I have to imagine, and other teams are different. Not every team is the Marlins, obviously. But I have to imagine this is probably in her mind, like, okay, let's give it a try. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it does work, it does work. But I don't get the sense that this is not someone who's, looking for a new career at 35. Like you said, she's been doing this longer than you've been alive. There's no real, I don't think there's any real need here or feeling of like, I've got to keep doing this. Which I think is a shame on its own too, is that the Marlins didn't just let go of someone who's qualified and accomplished. They might have actually ended her career as a general manager type in baseball in the process. Because she may decide, you know what? I don't want to deal with this again. Do you know what I think
really end up happening though?
What's that?
You know who has a vacant GM spot?
The Boston Red Sox, but it's not going to be Kim Ng.
No.
Why would she do that? I don't want that to happen to her. I would feel very bad if she got hired there.
Do you know where she played stickball growing up, John?
The mean streets of Flatbush?
Queens.
Oh. Well, that's Brooklyn. But okay,
she joins David Stern's front office.
But that's the thing. I think leaving the Marlins aspect out, and granted that's a big part of it.
But you could stick it to him. You could stick it to the Marlins front office by joining the Mets and just to rub it in.
I could see that, but at the same time, I think part of this too for Ng wasn't just this team is cheap and run by liars. It's that she doesn't want to be anyone's subordinate. She did
But it
that.
might be collaborative. I don't know what her relationship would be like with David Stearns. I don't know.
I just have a hard time seeing the Mets hiring someone in Stearns and then after the fact, because it wouldn't be the plan either, because it would clearly be a reaction to Ng being available.
True.
And then after the fact being like, oh, we're also going to hire someone who's basically going to do your job too, but maybe be subordinate to you, but we'll figure it out. That is just
maybe that's why the Yankees make more sense, is because Cashman already has that relationship with her dating back to many years. Yeah.
But I think it seems like one of the major issues here was that she, and deservedly so, has earned the right to run a front office. Yeah. And not just as a general manager, but as a president of baseball operations. I think.
But can you do that in New York with the Yankees? Like take Cashman's,
but that's problem. That's the problem. I think Cashman is the president of baseball operations for the New York Yankees. I don't know if that's his exact title or if it's, senior general manager or whatever.
In all these organizations.
There's so much title inflation. It's like all white collar work has that, but Major League Baseball is lousy with it. It's the finance world writ small.
Well, you're the senior editor of social media of the First Order at Fangraphs.com.
The First Order will bring back order to Fangraphs, but I just have a hard time seeing her being willing to be someone else's number two when a large part of why this happened is because the Marlins were like, okay, you've been demoted, you're now number two.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's going to be I think if there were a team that had a completely blank slate and an ownership that was like, hey, do whatever you want, we'll support you 100%, sure. I just don't know that that exists right now, if only because I think if the Mets had not hired Stearns, then I think that's a realistic possibility. But I don't think I don't think she'd be, again, pure guesswork. I don't know Kim Ng. I have no idea what she's thinking, but I have a
She's
hard
actually
time...
joining the Chase Thomas podcast. Is it? Yeah, we brought on Kim, and she's going to be our analyst here going forward.
I
Awesome.
like it. That means
Come
I
on
don't
the
have to
podcast,
think
Kim.
of takes anymore. This is great. I can just sit here and remind people that in 2004, the Boston Red Sox were down 3-0 in a best-of-7 ALCS against the Yankees, and then came back and won it. Something that no team in Major League Baseball history had ever done before, and that hopefully no other team ever does again. Regardless.
Her interviews also seem like she's more real than a lot of other GMs. Like, she'll talk, like, the way she talks on the record and just the way I don't know. I think she's actually a sneaky good interview. I think she'd be a pretty good analyst. Like,
I think so too.
We're pretty open.
I just have a hard time seeing her accepting a subordinate role in another front office when it seems like part of the problem, or part of her stepping away from the Marlins, was that they were going to make her a subordinate in her own front office. And, again, like, kudos to her for getting out. Shame on the Marlins perpetually, because they are just the kind of team that does this. I think too that they're going to find, although maybe this is part of it too, is that, well, now they can just go hire some AGM from somewhere else and pay him like $85,000 a year to do this, because all the Marlins really care about is saving as much money as they can. Which, if that's the case, God be with them. I'm just glad that once again we do not have to regard the Marlins as a serious enterprise. They belong in that Rockies tier. They make it clear every single year by doing at least one unfathomably stupid thing that puts them in there to begin with. Good luck, Marlins. I don't know what they're thinking.
I love it. It's always the Marlins. Does Juan Soto make sense for the Red Sox, Jon
Absolutely
Taylor?
not, no.
Why?
No, for starters, I don't...
Lean into it, John.
Similar to Kim Ng, don't
Juan
do that
Soto
to Juan
mania.
Soto. Don't make he deserves so much better than that, than just that nightmare of a currently constructed operation.
He fixes everything. I don't know what you mean, John.
Does he pitch now?
I mean, he could. Why not?
I mean, he probably could. First, I think that's the big thing, is if you're the Red Sox and you've got a limited number of bullets to fire off here, they need to be spent on pitching, because that is the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth biggest problem with this team. They don't have pitching. Second, I think if you're the Padres, and who knows with AJ Preller, because the 16 mice that run his brain by yanking on cords and pulleys all the time don't really ever seem to be in agreement on how they're going to do it. But I would have to imagine that if you're AJ Preller and you're actually seriously considering moving Soto, you want to get a haul in return, because you gave up a monster haul to get him in the first place. Like, you're going to have to sell him for a portion of the dollar you spent. You're not going to get an equal return from anyone for Soto, for the simple fact of he is that much closer now to free agency than he was when the Padres acquired him. This coming season is his last under team control. With Scott Boras as an agent, there is a 0.0000000 to the end of the world chance that he's going to sign any kind of long-term extension, which means the Padres have to extract as much value as they can in any trade to make up for that. To say nothing of the fact that this particular Padres roster is both it's in a weird position where they're both win now, so they need help immediately, but they also have a very thinned out farm system, so they need help for the future too. And I don't really know how you balance that if you're the Padres, if you're Preller trying to figure out what kind of trade return you would want, but it's going to have to be a deep and multi-layered one for that to make any sense for San Diego. And then the other issue, which I just brought up, was you only get a season's worth of Soto. And for this Red Sox team that is not in immediate contention, that doesn't really make any sense. Unless ownership has already decided we're not just going to get him, but we're also going to make him a huge extension offer, then it doesn't really make sense. And I have a really hard time seeing this front office, the one that let Mookie Betts and oh my god, I totally blanked. Mookie Betts and Xander Bogaerts walk over. I mean, in Bogaerts' case, the contract the Padres offered him was never going to happen in Boston, but that let him get to that point in the first place. They turned around and did the deal for Rafael Devers. I'm convinced it's only because if they hadn't, John Henry would have been beheaded on Lansdowne Street. I don't think that they're in the market to make that kind of offer to anyone. Maybe when Soto does reach free agency, then we can talk and we can see where things are at. but I don't really see that being their modus operandi at this point, especially because there's no one even really in charge right now, which also complicates things. So I think if Soto is going to get moved, it has to be to a team that is right there already and that has a deep farm system that can afford to lose some bodies. Baltimore strikes me immediately as a realistic option. Texas, similarly, like we've talked about, the deep farm system and a win now roster, I think would make. It's tough because there is only a year left on his contract. You have to be really, really convinced that you are right there, right at the top. Which also makes me think that an ostensible contender, or not a sensible contender, that a team that ostensibly would be in a super contender like Atlanta is probably going to look at that situation and go, no. We know we can get there without him. That's not what we need. We need whatever else, we'll talk about it when
they're going
to
to shake up something. Alex Anthopoulos' recent interview this week, they're doing something bold. I don't know what it's going to be, but something bold is coming down the pike in Atlanta.
I can see that, but I think teams like Atlanta, the Dodgers, Houston, I think they really like the stability they've created and that they don't have to do things like go out and get a Juan Soto. That
if it comes Juan Soto, but they're like, it just depends. Everything is a case by case basis, but and also circumstance of like, hey, you've lost twice in back to back. Like I would not rule out both the Dodgers and the Braves doing some. I mean, Braves more so than the Dodgers. They're going to do something that surprises you in a major way. I'll just go and tell you that.
I could also see maybe a team like the Yankees or the Mets just wanting to. The Mets maybe just to make the splash. I don't know how they would make that work, but regardless, I mean, I find it unlikely that Soto gets dealt anyway because I just don't think any team is going to make an offer that the Padres are going to deem sufficient. I think they would rather just play out the string. Because again, when you look at what the Padres did this season, yeah, they were bad, but a lot of that was terrible luck. Not terrible luck necessarily, but a terrible record in one-run games, a terrible record in extra innings games. The kind of stuff that, you can drill down real deep into it and see if there is some existing extant reason for that. But also is like, well, sometimes you just lose one-run games, and it's just kind of dumb luck in some ways. I think that the Padres can probably make an argument. I think Preller can probably make an argument to himself that this roster can contend. We don't need to tear anything down. We give it one last shot with this group that we've assembled. And if it doesn't work, then we'll figure out a new path. And quite honestly, if it doesn't work next year, AJ Preller's probably out of a job anyway. So what does it really matter for him? He's not incentivized to do anything for the future of the Padres unless he knows he's going to be around for the future of the Padres. And so I think that would make a Soto deal that much less likely because any Soto deal for the Padres is admitting to some degree or another, we are not going to be contending as much. We're not going to be as strong a contender in 2024 because I find it really hard to believe that any trade where Juan Soto leaves makes the Padres better or keeps them as good for 2024 as one where he's just on the roster anyway and they go out and fill the pieces or fill the holes they need to fill through free agency or smaller trades. So, I think, again, if Soto's going to get dealt, I think that makes the most sense to a team like Baltimore or Texas or maybe a Mets team that wants to make a splash or, I'd love Cincinnati. That would be a big-time trade for Cincinnati.
They're not doing that.
No, they're not. But that's kind of the thing, too, is that those kinds of teams that can actually afford it on a prospect level, a Baltimore or Cincinnati, if I look again at our prospect rank, our farm system rankings, a team like Washington, Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, they're not going to make that kind of move. They are small market teams that do not want to spend and do not want to give up cost-controlled assets for a dude who will not be there in a year. Because that's the other part of it. Baltimore is not giving Juan Soto a $400 million contract. That just is not happening. They're not going to give anyone a $400 million contract, but they're definitely not giving Juan Soto a $400 million contract. So I think more likely than not, who knows, the offseason's crazy. But I think for now, I would not expect the Padres to trade Soto anywhere, really.
I like it. John, final thing here as we wrap up on this edition of Take Graphs here on the Chase Thomas Podcast. Rangers or Phillies? We're operating under the assumption that both probably end up winning both of their respective series here. And I think that's what we really want because both have looked like juggernauts this postseason. I think it gives you the best potential matchup in the World Series, which is what you really want.
Heck yeah.
If we get Rangers and Phillies, Jon Tayler, who matches up better with who?
I continue to believe that the Phillies are essentially matchup proof. The lineup hits everybody. If they've got this version of Aaron Nola on the regular, they match up with anyone's top two starters. The high leverage guys in this bullpen have been more or less untouchable. I think the one thing, and of course, as I keep mentioning, postseason games at Citizens Bank Park are automatic losses for road teams. Nobody wins there. It is, at this point, it seems categorically impossible to beat the Phillies in Philadelphia, which I think is a huge part of this too. Granted, I think Texas matches up with them really well. I think a lot of that, like I said before, is going to depend on what version of Max Scherzer Texas gets. If he looks healthy and sharp tonight against the Astros, boy, that's gonna make any World Series against Philadelphia that much tougher, because they can actually go 3 deep with Scherzer and Montgomery and Eovaldi. If Scherzer looks rusty or just is clearly not himself, I think it swings probably back toward Philly's favor, because again, the thing you run into with Texas is who is pitching after Eovaldi and Montgomery. It's going to have to be some combo of Dane Dunning and Andrew Heaney, and really who knows what else. And this is where obviously DeGrom is missed the most, but also where Scherzer is missed the most. They really need him back healthy, I think, to make any World Series dreams a full reality. So I think it hinges on that. If Scherzer is healthy and productive, I think Texas can give Philly that matchup. I would worry about the bullpen, but I'm going to keep worrying about that bullpen. In particular, I worry that Leclerc is going to wear down completely by the time the World Series rolls around. Really, what Texas needs more than anything at some point in this series, ideally they finish it, ideally in their minds they finish it in 4. They need a blowout tonight if they want to set them up really, really well. Not just to demoralize Houston going forward and really, make it feel like an impossibility when they're up 3-0, but to give that part of the bullpen, particularly Leclerc, a night off, give him a beat, especially because we're now in that portion of the CS or the ALCS where we've got 3 games back to back to back, all going to be in Houston. They need to find a way. If they can't win Game 3 tonight, they've got to find a way to get Leclerc some rest in there somewhere. To the point where I think, honestly, if they are down, even if it's close late, I think they have to try to let someone else get those outs, because they know they're going to have another game to play on Thursday. And if they lose Wednesday, they're going to have to play another game on Friday. They need a rested Leclerc for that. I know they just had the day off anyway, but ideally get him as much time as you can, because he really seems to be the only reliever Bruce Bochy trusts. But I think, everything right now just feels like Phillies, doesn't it? The vibe is just so very much a Phillies World Series win.
I mean,
think
it felt
regardless
kind of like
of who
that
they
last
meet.
year.
It did, but I think at the same time, the way Houston rolled through the American League, I don't really know that it felt like an impossibility for the Phillies. I think it more just felt like, oh man, they're really doing this. This team looks different in a way, man. This team looks like, I worry what happens when the home runs stop being hit. But at the same time, why would you assume the home runs stop being hit in a lineup with Kyle Schwarber and Trey Turner and Bryce Harper and Nick Castellanos and JT Realmuto?
You want to ask me about how home runs can just stop happening in the postseason, Jon
That's
Tayler?
fair. But that's because you had to face Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola and a good Ranger Suarez too.
Yeah.
Like, granted, and turn that around. The Phillies had to face Spencer Strider and it thins out a little bit after that, but. Again, this is why I think Scherzer is so important for Texas's World Series hopes. If they can go 3 deep in the rotation, they are so well set up to match Philly and to keep that lineup down at least enough where because their offense, that is the offense, I think even more so than Houston, that can match the Phillies run for run going forward. That has the power, that has the speed, that has the contact ability to make something happen. Even if the home runs aren't being hit for the Rangers, I think they can still make runs happen. You saw that when they played Baltimore. You've seen it so far when they've played Houston. I'm trying to think how many home runs have even been hit in the first 2 games of the ALCS. I think it's only 1 or 2.
Yeah.
It's not the Phillies who've just been bashing them left and right. Texas is getting its runs from a variety of places. So, I think, again, healthy Scherzer, I think the Rangers are in really good shape for a World Series if they make it that far. Not healthy Scherzer? Well, I don't even know if the Rangers make it out of the ALCS.
I like it. Jon Tayler, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Fangraphs.com this week?
So, as always with the postseason, we will be running game pieces or recaps of every game that's happening. So check for those late at night or early in the morning when you wake up. So you can, if you missed the game or if you really just want to, look at it through a fresh set of eyes, you can check out our gamers. One of the nice things about this particular Philadelphia-Arizona NLCS matchup is that we have boots on the ground in both places. Michael Baumann, who had a lovely sidebar piece for Game 2 off of Trey Turner, his 1 inning of both highs and lows. Similarly, in Arizona, we're going to have our own editor-in-chief, Meg Rowley, at the stadium, ready to file off what she finds. So if you want some color from those games, check out those as they're coming. On top of that, we are already starting to get our off-season stuff in line because, folks, the season will be over by, at the very latest, November 4th. there's only like 2 more weeks of baseball left at best. So we are already starting to think ahead to the first big project of our offseason, which is our top 50 free agent ranking. Number 1, I feel like is pretty obvious. I think, from the season he's had, from the accolades he's received, from the way everyone feels about him.
Like, my prediction on this is going to be so bad because I don't think he's being signed right away. I think the owners are really going to push back on this. I think he's going to sit for way too long. I'm really concerned about the disc. It's going to be bad.
I also am worried about what's going to happen to Adam Duvall.
Yeah.
So I was trying to remember in my head the list of free agents because I was like, I can't say Blake Snell because that's not actually a funny joke.
No.
But yeah, it'll be the Shohei Ohtani top 50. We do it every year. Ben Clemens is already building the list out and making the case for folks. So 5 days after the end of the World Series, that is when free agency officially starts. We will have our list out right as free agency starts. So look for that in the coming future. Otherwise, like I said, check us out for our game recaps. Check us out for our playoff coverage. Just in terms of that, we've got a piece on Thursday from Davey Andrews about the postseason bullpens. We've got a piece from Leo Morgenstern about intentional walks in the postseason. We've got a piece from Esteban Rivera. I really like the stuff Esteban does. It's really mechanics focused. He's going to do something on swing path variants that if you're a mechanics nerd, definitely check his stuff out. I thought he did a great piece on Gabriel Moreno the other day, who's really, really been a bright spot for Arizona so far. But regardless of what you're coming to Fangraphs for, if you're not a member, come on and join us. Sign up as a member for $5 a month or what is it? No, $10 a month or $60 a year ad-free. I've been doing it so often, I still forget it sometimes. Okay. $60 a year gets you ad-free browsing plus some cool other perks. Stick around for all the cool off-season stuff we're going to do because Fangraphs is where baseball doesn't stop even when baseball stops.
There you go. I love all these different taglines.
They just come to me from the deep like a dream.
There you go. Very Twin Peaksy. Jon Tayler, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you next week.